Okay, so welcome to the deep dive. And today we're diving into, well, a case that's really stayed with a lot of people, I think.
It
The
has.
2014 Slenderman stabbing.
Yeah, in Waukesha, Wisconsin.
Right.
It's, I think a lot of people remember this one. Two 12-year-old girls
Yeah.
attacked a classmate, and it all kind of revolved around this belief in Slender Man.
It's a case that, it's really disturbing, obviously.
Oh, absolutely.
But it's also incredibly complex,
Yeah.
when you think about it. I mean,
A lot going on.
yeah, and I think that's what we want to do today in this deep dive is to really kind of try to understand some of the significant developments that have happened.
Yeah.
And really where things stand now
Right.
for all the people whose lives were really just completely changed by this.
And we have some recent news
Wait.
as of early 2025, so we'll get into all of that.
Yeah, so we're looking at, news articles that have been updated as of early 2025.
Right.
We're also looking at the Wikipedia entry, which has a, really comprehensive overview
Exactly. Gives us a lot of
of
background.
the whole case.
Yeah, and so we can really kind of take everything together and see, what's happened to the key figures in this case.
Yeah, so I mean, it is a really dark story,
Yeah.
but I think by kind of understanding the nuances of it and the paths that these young people have taken, I think it can offer some perspective on
Absolutely.
a really, really tough case.
Yeah.
So maybe we just start right at the beginning
Okay.
with the attack itself.
Yeah, so the attack itself took place on May 31st, 2014,
Okay.
and it was in a wooded area of Davids Park
Okay.
near Waukesha, Wisconsin.
Okay.
And the victim was Payton Leutner. She's also often referred to as Bella,
Okay.
and she was 12 at the time.
Okay. And the perpetrators?
Yeah. So the two girls who carried out this attack were also 12 years old.
Oh.
Anissa Weier and Morgan Geyser.
Okay, so all three girls 12 years old.
Exactly.
And this is where, I mean, the motive here is something that's still, I think, hard for a lot of people to wrap their minds around.
Absolutely.
This belief in Slender Man and that by harming Peyton,
Yeah.
they would appease him and keep their own family safe.
It's a hard one to grasp, for sure.
Yeah.
That level of belief.
Yeah.
But it really speaks to, how powerful beliefs can be, especially at that age,
Yeah.
where you're still developing and figuring things out. And
Yeah. I mean, how do you even begin to, reason with that at that age?
it's hard. And I think it's something that we as adults even struggle with sometimes,
Huh.
beliefs that
Absolutely.
seem detached from reality.
Yeah.
So yeah, the attack itself was very violent.
Yeah.
Morgan Geyser actually stabbed Peyton 19 times
19 times.
with a 5-inch blade,
Oh my gosh.
and they had lured her into the woods under the pretense of playing hide and seek.
Okay.
And Anissa Weier was present for the attack.
Wow. 19 times. That is,
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
a really hard thing to hear.
It is, and the injuries were incredibly severe.
Yeah, were they life-threatening?
So the stab wounds were on Peyton's arms, her legs, and her torso.
Okay.
2 of the wounds actually penetrated major organs.
Oh my gosh.
One of them was an artery connected to her heart.
Okay.
Her diaphragm, her liver, and her stomach were all damaged.
Wow.
And one of the stabbings actually missed a major artery by less than a millimeter.
Gosh.
So she really came incredibly close to dying.
Wow.
But, despite all of this, after being stabbed so many times and left alone in the woods,
Yeah.
Peyton's will to survive was just remarkable.
Yeah, I mean, to be able to get help
Exactly.
at that point is incredible.
Yeah, so she managed to crawl to a nearby road,
Okay.
and that's where a cyclist found her
Okay.
and thankfully called for help.
Oh my goodness. Thank goodness for that cyclist.
Really?
Yeah.
So she underwent 6 hours of emergency surgery,
Oh my God.
and she spent a week recovering in the hospital.
Wow. So what happened to Morgan and Anissa?
Yeah, so they were apprehended by law enforcement about 5 hours later.
Oh.
They were found near a Steinhafels furniture store
Okay.
alongside Interstate 94,
Mm-hmm.
which is about 5 miles from where the attack took place.
Okay.
And they still had the knife with them.
Wow.
And they were actually trying to walk to Nicollet National Forest,
Okay.
which they believed was about 200 miles away,
Okay.
because they thought that's where Slender Man's mansion was.
So they were still, in that
So-
mindset
I
of trying to get to Slender Man.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, that really speaks to the extent of their delusion.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And so once they were in custody, What were the initial kind of legal steps that were taken?
So both girls were initially charged as adults with attempted homicide.
Wow, at 12 years old.
Yeah, it's a very controversial decision.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Morgan Geyser was charged with first-degree attempted intentional homicide,
Okay.
and Anissa Weier was charged with second-degree attempted intentional homicide.
Okay.
So there was a distinction there in terms of the degree of the charges.
Yeah, and I can imagine that, their mental state quickly became kind of front and center
Oh, absolutely.
in these legal proceedings.
Yeah, so in the fall of 2014, Morgan Geyser received a diagnosis of early onset childhood schizophrenia.
Okay.
And this revealed that she had actually been experiencing visual and auditory hallucinations her whole life.
Wow. So this wasn't something that had just come on.
No, it seemed to be something that she had been dealing with for quite a while.
Gosh, and what about Anissa?
So she initially entered a plea of not guilty by reason of mental disease or defect.
Okay, so how did their cases then proceed, taking into account these mental health factors?
Yeah, so it was a long process.
Yeah.
Anissa Weier eventually pleaded guilty to a lesser charge
Okay.
of attempted second-degree homicide,
Right.
and this was in August of 2017.
Okay.
And then the following month, a jury found her not guilty by reason of mental disease or defect.
Okay.
Morgan Geyser also pleaded guilty in September of 2017,
Okay.
and similarly, she was found not guilty by reason of mental disease or defect.
Due to schizophrenia.
Due to schizophrenia, yes.
Wow. So it seems like, while they admitted to the act, the legal system really recognized that their mental states were a significant factor in what happened.
Exactly, and that's reflected in the sentences as well.
Okay, so what were their sentences?
So Anissa Weier was sentenced to a maximum of 25 years in a psychiatric facility,
Okay.
specifically the Winnebago Mental Health Institute.
Okay.
And Morgan Geyser received a longer sentence of 40 years
Okay.
in a psychiatric hospital.
Wow, so these sentences really prioritized that treatment and rehabilitation aspect
Exactly.
alongside, the concern for public safety.
Yeah, they're trying to balance all of those factors.
Right, and have there been any developments since their sentencing in terms of, their confinement or potential release?
Yeah, so there have been some pretty big developments, particularly with Anissa Weier.
Okay.
She was actually granted conditional release in September 2021.
Oh, wow.
And this came with several conditions.
Okay.
She had GPS monitor restrictions on her internet access and mandatory ongoing psychiatric treatment.
Okay.
And she was required to live with her father until she turns 37.
Wow. So a lot of conditions there.
A lot of conditions.
But it seems like, there's a recognition that she has made progress.
Yeah, and even more recently, in September of 2023, her GPS monitoring was discontinued.
Oh, wow. So that's a really positive sign.
It is. It suggests that, she's been doing well and meeting those conditions.
Right. And what about Morgan? Have there been any similar attempts at release for her?
Yes, she has actually filed multiple petitions for release,
Okay.
starting back in June of 2022.
Yeah.
But her initial attempts were either withdrawn or denied by the court.
Okay.
Most recently, in April of 2024, a judge rejected her release,
Okay.
citing concerns about public safety at the time.
So it sounds like, it was deemed that she wasn't quite ready.
Yeah, but there has been a significant development since then.
Oh, okay. What's that?
In January of 2025, a judge actually granted Morgan's conditional release.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And this decision was made after expert testimony about the, quote, impressive progress, unquote, that she's made in her mental health treatment.
That's encouraging.
It is.
Yeah.
So Morgan is now 22,
Okay.
and she's actually undergoing a gender transition as a transgender male.
Okay.
His chosen name hasn't been made public.
Okay.
But the Wisconsin Department of Health Services has been given 60 days
Okay.
to organize a plan for him to live in a supervised group home.
Okay.
And this would be until the year 2058.
Wow. So that's a substantial length of continued supervision.
It is.
But I guess it also kind of underscores the long-term implications of such a severe case.
Absolutely. And the ongoing need for support and monitoring.
Right. And there was actually a canceled hearing recently in February?
Yes. There was a hearing scheduled for February of 2025,
Right.
but it was canceled
Because of,
due to some concerning new allegations.
oh, wow.
There were reports that Morgan had engaged in some violent communication
Okay.
with someone outside the facility. And there was also some reading material found within the facility that was concerning.
What was the nature of that?
It involved themes of sexual sadism and murder.
So really disturbing stuff.
Very disturbing.
Yeah.
Um, but despite these allegations, the mental health professionals who had previously evaluated Morgan and recommended the conditional release,
Right.
they maintained their opinion. They said that they still felt release was appropriate,
Okay.
even after these new allegations came to light.
Wow. So despite these concerns, the conditional release is moving forward.
It is.
Okay.
There is a new hearing scheduled for March 24th, 2025,
Okay.
to finalize the specifics of the release plan.
So still a lot to be worked out.
Yeah, it's definitely an evolving situation.
Yeah, it's a very complex case.
It is.
And, kind of switching gears a little bit to Payton Leutner,
Yeah.
her journey after this attack must have been so incredibly challenging.
Oh, absolutely, both physically and emotionally.
Yeah.
She had to undergo extensive surgery to repair the damage that was done to her vital organs.
Right.
But she was left with 25 physical scars,
Oh, my gosh.
which are a constant reminder of what she went through.
Yeah. And the emotional scars, I imagine, are, probably even deeper.
Yeah, and they manifested in different ways.
How so?
Payton shared later that for a long time after the attack, she slept with broken scissors under her pillow
Oh, my goodness.
as a way of protecting herself.
So she must have been, just terrified.
Absolutely living in constant fear.
Yeah. And did she ever speak publicly about her experience?
She did. She gave her first public interview in October of 2019.
Okay.
And it was just this remarkable display of strength and resilience.
Yep.
What's really incredible is that while she said she had no desire to ever see Morgan or Anissa again,
Yeah.
she also expressed empathy for Morgan Geyser's mother,
Oh, wow.
recognizing the immense challenges of dealing with a child with schizophrenia.
That's incredible.
It is.
I mean, to have that level of understanding after what she went through.
Yeah, it speaks to her character.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's also striking is her perspective on how the attack actually shaped her life.
Right. She said that despite the horror of it,
Yeah.
the experience actually gave her a clearer sense of purpose and direction for her future.
Wow.
She even said that she wouldn't be who she is today without it.
That is amazing.
It's really powerful.
Yeah, to find any sort of positive meaning in something so traumatic.
Yeah.
What does she see for her future? What path was she hoping to take?
So she graduated high school and is now pursuing a career in the medical field.
Oh, wow, that's great.
Yeah, as of September 2021, she was a sophomore in college
Great.
and also working part-time.
Wow, so really doing well.
Yeah, she's really thriving.
It's so inspiring to hear.
Yeah, and her mom actually issued a statement
Oh, cool.
prior to Morgan Geyser's recent release hearing,
Okay.
expressing her confidence in the judicial system to ensure the safety of the community and, of course, her daughter.
Wow, so a lot of trust there in the system to do the right thing.
Yeah, it seems like they're really trying to focus on moving forward
Yeah, absolutely.
in a positive way.
Right. In this case, also, it had this ripple effect
It did.
far beyond just those directly involved.
Yeah.
It really impacted the whole Slenderman phenomenon
Oh, absolutely.
in a huge way.
The Creepypasta community was very quick to respond.
Yeah.
Eric Knudsen, who actually created Slenderman,
Great.
he issued a statement expressing his profound sadness about the tragedy.
Okay.
And the administrator of the Creepypasta Wiki also made a statement emphasizing that this was an isolated incident and not at all representative of the broader community.
Right.
That they also explicitly stated that they do not condone real-world violence.
So really kind of trying to distance themselves from the
That's
actions
really-
of these girls.
They wanted to make it very clear that this was not what their community was about.
Right.
And they actually went a step further.
Okay.
They organized a 24-hour live stream event to raise money for Payton's medical expenses.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So, really kind of showing their support for her and their
Exactly.
condemnation of the attack.
Yeah, they wanted to do something tangible to help.
Yeah, and the wider community in Wisconsin also really rallied around Payton, didn't they?
They did. There was a huge outpouring of support.
Yeah.
Wisconsin actually declared a Purple Hearts for Healing Day
Oh, wow.
in her honor.
That's amazing.
And a local bratwurst festival in Madison raised over $70,000
Wow.
to help with her medical costs.
That's incredible.
So there was a real sense of community coming together to support her.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's, you see that in a lot of cases where there's a horrific act of violence, but it really is amazing to see that type of community support.
It is, and it speaks to the human desire to help, to come together in times of need.
And this case also, it sparked a really big debate about the impact of the internet on children.
It did.
Particularly with, access to this darker content.
Yeah, and it kind of brought to light that, that tension between the benefits of the internet and the potential harms.
Right, especially for younger people.
Yeah, law enforcement officials started issuing warnings to parents about the dark and wicked things that are out there online.
Right.
But then, on the other hand, you had people arguing that creepypasta, like other forms of fiction, isn't inherently dangerous.
Right.
And that it can actually serve as a creative outlet for young people.
Right.
So it's really about finding that balance.
Yeah, and I think this is a conversation that continues today.
Absolutely.
And, the Wikipedia entry also mentions a period of moral panic that kind of surrounded Slender Man.
Yeah, after the stabbing.
Right.
Yeah, it really became this nationwide phenomenon.
Yeah, he went from, being this relatively obscure...
Right, a niche online thing.
Right, to suddenly being...
Front
page news linked to this really, horrific real-world violence.
And that really changed how people perceived him.
Yeah.
And the online community that was associated with him.
Right.
And unfortunately, there were reports of other incidents.
Involving Slender Man.
Involving children and Slender Man.
Okay.
It's hard to say how much of that was directly influenced by the stabbing.
Right.
But it definitely seemed to be fueled by this heightened anxiety and awareness.
Yeah, I can imagine. And how did the community itself respond to this kind of, shift in perception?
It was definitely a difficult time for them.
Yeah.
But interestingly, in the years following the stabbing, there was a noticeable increase in more benevolent portrayals of Slender Man.
Oh, wow. So almost a pushback against the violence.
They wanted to reclaim the character in a way.
Right.
Distance him from the horrific events that had happened.
So kind of taking back control of the narrative.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
It is.
And, we can't talk about this case without talking about the 2018 film.
The Slender Man film, yeah.
It generated a lot of controversy.
It did.
People accused the filmmakers of exploiting this tragedy for financial gain.
Yeah, and Anissa Weir's father was particularly vocal about this.
Yeah.
He called the film extremely distasteful.
Yeah.
And urged local theaters not to show it.
Wow.
There were protests, and some theaters in the Waukesha area did actually refuse to screen the movie.
So it really brought up these ethical considerations.
Absolutely.
About, when it's okay to turn real-life tragedies into entertainment.
Yeah, where do you draw the line?
Right, and, this case has also shown up in other areas of popular culture, too.
Oh, it has?
Yeah.
It's been featured in documentaries, like the HBO documentary Beware the Slender Man.
Mm-hmm.
TV shows like Law & Order, SVU, and Criminal Minds have had episodes inspired by it.
Wow.
There was a Lifetime movie called Terror in the Woods.
Okay.
And a Netflix movie called Mercy Black.
Okay.
Which also drew some inspiration from the stabbing.
So it's really seeped into our collective consciousness, this story.
It's become this cautionary tale in a way.
Right. And, so much has happened since that day in 2014.
Yeah. It's hard to believe it's been over a decade.
Yeah.
But here we are with Morgan Geyser now on the verge of conditional release.
Yeah.
Anissa Weier continuing to do well under supervised release, and Payton Leutner showing incredible resilience.
Yeah.
Pursuing her dreams.
Yeah, it's really a story of, kind of the long-lasting effects of this event.
Yeah, the ripples just keep going.
Yeah, and how these three young women's lives have been so drastically changed.
Yeah, and in such different ways.
Right.
And I think it really forces us to consider the complexities of mental health,
right,
the power of online narratives,
right,
and the devastating consequences of violence for everyone involved.
Absolutely. And I think this case, more than a decade later, it's still a reminder of the need for understanding, for support, and for really thinking critically about the information we consume, especially for young people.
Absolutely. We need to equip them with the tools to navigate this complex world.
Yeah, and I think, as we wrap up, I'm left thinking about the individual journeys of these three women.
Yeah.
All forever marked by this one horrific event.
Yeah.
But now each on such a different path.
It's really a testament to the human capacity for both good and bad.
Absolutely.
And how those forces can intersect in such unexpected and often tragic ways.
Yeah. And with that, I think we'll leave it there for today. But thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the Slender Man case.
Thanks for having me.
And we hope you'll join us again next time for another look at a complex and captivating story.